Good evening. Well, I have to say, over the years, I have had really quite a fun life, done an awful lot of things that were very interesting. Not much really lives up to the last 2 or 3 days. In America, I arrived late on Sunday night, and I went first to a Donald Trump rally that took place in a town called Reading in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania seemed to be the absolutely key state in every way in this election. And I was really surprised and flattered that he noticed I was in the audience.
He was the big winner of the last election in the UK, and he's a very spectacular man, very highly respected, Nigel Farage.
Well, that was very nice of him. But hey, I've been a very loyal friend over the course of the last 9 years. I've never wavered or wobbled in my support of him, even at times when it hasn't necessarily been that easy. I went on the morning of polling day, and I stood outside a polling station in Pennsylvania just talking to voters as they were coming in and out. And the common observation was there are more Trump signs on lawns this time than we saw in 2020 or we saw in 2016. Why is that? I asked. Well, we're not afraid to say we're Donald Trump supporters anymore. That was very interesting. Suddenly, he wasn't quite the devil that perhaps people thought he was or he'd been made out to be. And I was literally in no doubt on the day that he'd win and win big. I went off to the Mar-a-Lago party, a private party, no press allowed in the room at all, apart from Tucker Carlson, who was given a room at the side. And it was just a remarkable scene. You know, there were a few hundred people in the ballroom, drinks, food, and sitting in the middle of it all was Donald Trump with Elon Musk next to him and people whooping and hollering, and Trump just sitting there eating an ice cream, completely nonchalant, as if, you know, well, whatever happens, happens. And that was remarkable. Then it was off to the convention centre for the Trump acceptance speech. About 2,000 of us crammed into a room, and boy, it was noisy. He came on stage with all of his family, with Melania's family, with the key people who'd supported the campaign and been part of it. And this is a small part of what he had to say.
I said that many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
Well, in fact, it was a very long speech, but hey, he won, and as it looks at the moment on the projections, he's probably going to finish up with 312 electoral college votes, and all he needed was 270 to win. So it isn't just a win, it's a very big win, and he's taken the Senate, and it looks like he'll take the lower house as well. This is a crushing, comprehensive victory for the Republicans over Kamala Harris and over the Democrats. But there's one figure in this that you probably haven't heard much about, but it was very, very interesting. He's a young man. He's 18 years old. His name is Barron Trump. There was a picture of me with Barron Trump at Mar-a-Lago. As you can see, now, I haven't suddenly become a midget. Barron is 6'9", age 18. Now, it was a pleasure. I met him before when he was about 14, but he's 18 years old now. Incredibly polite, very well turned out, and remarkably smart. He told me more about my social media clips over the years than I can even remember. And he is credited with convincing his father that for this election, they should do podcasts. And that's what Trump did. Podcast after podcast after podcast. Many of those podcasts aimed at young voters, many of them aimed in many ways at young male voters. And, you know, I noticed on the night there were lots of boxers, lots of UFC fighters, a lot of alpha male stuff going on. And I think young Barron actually played quite a significant role in the victory of his father. But the question for us is Donald Trump's election good news for Britain? Now, I think it is, because he's instinctively pro-British. I think it is because when he was president, he was more than happy to do a trade deal with us. The problem was our Conservative government hadn't got Brexit done. We weren't in a position to be able to do so. But given that Trump is saying 10% tariffs on anything that comes in from anywhere else in the world, That, I think, presents a big dilemma to Keir Starmer's government. There are other problems too. I suspect the handover of the Chagos Islands, casting long-term doubt over the naval base that the Americans use on Diego Garcia, I suspect that could become a problem. And not to mention some very disobliging things that have been said by very senior Labour politicians, including, of course, Sadiq Khan, who's now 10 years into an outright feud with Donald Trump. Well, let's talk to somebody who remembers when relationships with us in America were really at their very best. I'm going to talk to Peggy Grande, who was an executive assistant to Ronald Reagan. Peggy, when you were around working for Ronnie Reagan, I mean, relationships with this country simply couldn't have been better, could they?
Well, thank you, Nigel, for having me on. And yes, that special relationship was as special as it has ever been. But I'll say, even when politicians come and go, and even when we have different sides of the aisle that maybe agree or disagree, I think that the American people and the people in Great Britain continue to have that special affinity for each other. So I don't think that changes with politics. And I look forward to Donald Trump returning to the White House and re-engaging with that special relationship, not only on a personal, warm and friendly level, but on a trade level. And making America great will also help make the rest of the world strong and safe again.
OK, but one of Trump's key policies is big tariffs. Now, we understand the logic of the argument, big tariffs on China over cars, and perhaps a policy that helped to win him Michigan and Wisconsin and states like that. But do you think this administration will be open to a trade deal with the United Kingdom?
Absolutely. And you and I both know Donald Trump well. He was the author of The Art of the Deal. So we know that he says these things that give him room to negotiate. He's not going to show you his cards. He's not going to show you where he's going to wind up. He is going to go to what some may say is an extreme policy, but he's going to come back to common sense, and it gives him room to negotiate. And so I have great faith and trust in him to be the architect of the art of the deal, whether it's with the UK or other places globally, to do what's best for the American people, but also what is smart and common sense. He wants to have economic entanglement with countries all over the world that lead to greater relationships and respect. And so I expect that he will do that in his second term as he did the first time.
Interesting. Now, Peggy, you've worked for Ronald Reagan. You've worked in the Trump White House. You are a lifelong Republican activist. Just how good does today feel?
It feels incredible. You know, not only have we given a mandate to Donald Trump to implement the policies that he has run on, but it's also been an utter rejection of the policies of the left. We have rejected both the message and the messenger of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And interestingly enough, we see Donald Trump leading the way and with a message of unity. He wants to usher in a golden age of America. And personally, I cannot wait to see that happen. I can't wait to be part of it. And we are very enthusiastic, not just as Republicans, but as the working class American population. 72 million of us have rejected the extremism of the left. We haven't listened to the lies. We have ignored the insults, the instructions, and the ignoring from the left. And we're going to return Donald Trump to the White House to make America great together, starting in January.
Peggy Grande, thank you very much indeed. Well, some joy there. I'm joined by George Eaton, senior online editor, New Statesman, and Ranulph Jarwardner, former Conservative member of Parliament. George, America has said no to woke.
Well, I think it's said no to the incumbents who they saw as failing on the economy. I think that was the factor above all. You know, you can't go to the country with living standards lower for some or barely higher than they were 4 years ago. It's actually the Reagan question. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The electorate answered no. I think that was the overriding factor. Obviously, there are cultural issues as well.
Yeah, no, there are. Ranulph, I mean, did you believe Trump could win like this?
Yes, I'd been saying to anyone who asked that I was pretty confident Trump was going to win. I think it's what is surprising is the scale of the win, including in the Senate as well.
Yeah.
So that scale is the thing that has surprised a lot of people. But now there is clarity in America, and as you've said in the past, he is an Anglophile. So there is an opportunity for the UK and the US to do some really exciting things together if the Labour government wants to take that opportunity.
Now, Peggy was very wise in talking about the art of the deal. Trump always asks for that and is prepared to settle for that, and that's been his business technique and his political technique. But we do face the prospect of tariffs. And that seems to me, George, to be rather interesting, because on the one hand, if the Labour government get over the insults, get over the 100 staffers that campaign there, and I guess in time we will get over these things. But if they start to negotiate on trade with America, Brussels won't like that. So where does Starmer go on this?
They will definitely want to avoid tariffs. I mean, the budget growth forecasts are already pretty anemic. So faced with the prospects of lower growth, high inflation, they will want to avoid that. Now, we know Trump is a deal maker. Obviously, free trade agreement's been mooted for a long time. I think it'll be quite difficult to get that across the line. I think you'd have rows over American beef. There are already issues with divisions amongst farmers here with the government. I also think you'd have a row over private American companies and the NHS. But Trump's unpredictable. And we know Labour want to do, they say, original things to boost growth. And the US is the biggest trading partner.
Well, absolutely. And equally, of course, we're the biggest foreign investor in America and vice versa. So all of that makes sense. But what about Brussels? What about Brussels? What about if Brussels say to Keir Starmer, with whom he wants a closer relationship, no, you're not doing that?
Yeah. Well, they're definitely not rejoining the customs union. So they are going to have freedom to strike these trade deals, unlike, as you say, the last time when we trapped in that transition period. It's going to be, on the one hand, I think you could see space for a close relationship with the US. The intelligence security relationship will always be there. But they'll have to make a call on foreign policy. Ukraine, obviously, is part of it, and a big call on defence spending.
Could Trump be good for the UK?
In some ways, though, he's unpredictable. I think that is what defines him. He's unpredictable. He's pragmatic. I think in some ways...
But it's interesting, you're from a centre-left publication, and you're not saying he's going to be awful.
No. I mean, look, I think he's unpredictable. And I certainly think Labour have to make that relationship as strong as possible, because they don't want to rejoin the EU. So actually, look, Atlanticism is such a key pole of Britain's foreign policy. They've got to make it work.
Ranald, the Donald, good for us?
Fundamentally, he's an Anglophile, so yes, having someone in the White House who wants to do more with the UK must be a good thing. The challenge is, will the government rise to the occasion? And the trade deal, a lot of work was done before 2020, before he left last time, so that could be revisited very quickly in the next 18 months. There is a window. So over to Keir and to David Lammy to strike it.
Over to Keir and David Lammy. Yes, David, you've said a few horrible things about the Donald. There is work to be done.